Manufacturing is one industry that doesn't suffer from a lack of data. You think about the historians, the PLCs, the SCADAs you've got across the business. The amount of data you have is phenomenal. But those legacy systems that you have that has that data you can do something with tend to be very, very siloed and often difficult to get that data out of. So really that prevents harnessing the information and the knowledge that you have within those systems to really create a large level of digital adoption.
Welcome to the Trend Detection Podcast, powered by Siemens. And now your host, Niall Sullivan.
Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of the Trend Detection Podcast. I'm really pleased to invite one of our previous guests back on, Nick Leeder. He was on, I think it was probably a month or so ago. I think we published the episode, or maybe even a couple of weeks. Time flies by so fast. But the most important thing, Nick's back. Really enjoyed our first conversation, and we're going to have another really interesting chat today. And we're talking about, the title of the episode is about unlocking value in digital manufacturing. But we're actually going to dive into the results of a really interesting report titled From Buzzwords to Benefits. So Nick, I guess in a moment you could explain exactly what the report means and why it was commissioned, I guess. But maybe you could do a quick one-line intro just to remind people who you are.
Yeah, sure.
You may not know who you are.
Yeah, so if you missed the last podcast, I guess, shame on you. I guess my name's Nick Leeder. So I've spent about 30 years in engineering and manufacturing, helping really bridge the gap between what the opportunities technology offers and the reality on the ground in running the operations and connecting those two things so that technology actually delivers tangible outcomes and benefits to manufacturing businesses. So that's my background as 30 years. I've done that as the customer, owning global transformations across many different countries, well over 100 factories for some of the businesses I work for. So companies like SKF, Dyson, Philips. These are the sort of companies I had senior positions on. I've also been global vice president in the software industry, as well as doing a little stint like some of us have done in management consultancy. So I've seen the challenges that manufacturers face from all sides of the table, and most importantly, probably for this podcast, being the person inside of the manufacturing business owning to drive the opportunities and the improvements.
Fantastic. No, thank you for that. Let's go straight into it. The report. So I guess, when was it commissioned? Why was it commissioned? And what are the sort of high level sort of insights from it, I guess, that came out of it?
Yeah. So really the report is all around the fact that smart manufacturing, digital transformation in manufacturing, industry 4.0, dare I say industry 5.0, all this stuff, is buzzwords, particularly if you're running the operations of a factory. What does this really mean? Your world is about producing product on time, to quality, as safely as possible, and ensuring that the margins of you doing that is as high as possible. So you do that, and then the next thing, somebody knocks on your door and says, "Hey, what's our strategy around agentic AI?" And it's like, this is a different world. It has no meaning to the day-to-day business. So why we commissioned the From Buzzwords to Benefits is a report that really breaks down the kind of the arc that you need to go through to take these things that take up airtime in management meetings and then translate them into tangible outcomes in your business. And not always doing and chasing the shiny tech, but actually focusing on, if I do agentic AI, whatever that really means, and I could give you an explanation, but I'm not the expert in this space. What does that mean to my operations, my KPIs, my margins, and really, really importantly, what does that mean to the people on the ground doing the day job that actually deliver the outcomes that you need? So that whole report is about, look, here are some of the things you hear, but here is the different steps of the process that you might want to go through or you need to go through to get to those same outcomes. So I'm sure through the course of today's podcast, we'll go into some of the key topics that report has, and dive a little deeper. Yeah.
Exactly. And a good summary to sort of start us off. But like I said, it's all about cutting through a very high level. It's cutting through all those buzzwords we hear every single day and getting straight through to the value. And what I really like about that is exactly what we try and do at Siemens as well. I mean, other companies surely do as well, but particularly with the Senseye product as well, we're always focused on the business outcomes, not the fact we've got cool AI technology or Gen AI technology. So that's where it resonated for me. So let's start picking through some of the some of the parts of the report. So you mentioned Industry 4.0, which is a term, great buzzword, which has been around for a long time. But I think one of the things in the report, which it recognises, actually that manufacturers see it as like a key component, but maybe haven't got the value from it yet. And is that because of this sort of overhype maybe around it, or are there other reasons, Nick, do you think?
Well, I think let's start off with saying Industry 4 seems to be last year's phrase, not. And actually, if we used a buzzword like Industry 4 and then just made it to say, look, hey guys, how can we use digital technologies to transform my operations and deliver operational efficiencies? It's not as catchy as Industry 4, but that's actually what it's all about. So actually, I do believe in what Industry 4 is trying to do, but many companies have struggled. They have got caught up in the buzzwords, and kind of the three things I see very often is why they don't get value is there's a lack of clear return of investment on these technologies. A lot of companies get caught up in the hype about what it could do without actually really understanding their why. And that their why is so important, because why do you do something? Is it improving or reducing downtime? Is it improving quality? Is it improving worker safety? Why are you doing this? How much will it improve those KPIs associated with your why? And then that gives you a very clear guidance on, okay, this is the use case we're actually going to do, and this is what we're going to deliver from doing that use case. So that disconnection between the opportunity and the measurable benefits is often very big. And that's actually, I'll come on to that later on. I think there's multiple reasons that exists. We do hear often also, another key area is we don't have the skills to make these technologies work. So I was in a conference last year where the focus of the skills gap in manufacturing was around that we don't have enough data scientists. And that's massively frustrating for me, because we've got in manufacturing huge knowledge and process knowledge, but that workforce is aging and it's leaving the business, and we don't, new talent's coming in. We need to transfer that process. Sometimes it's called tribal knowledge, of what you have in your factory. And then we also then need to be able to apply that to the new technology. So we shouldn't be looking for data scientists. What we should be looking for is brilliant talent that understands the manufacturing operations, that can apply their logic to using in a data science world. But you bring data scientists in that don't have the process knowledge, that's a fundamental gap. That means that the value from those solutions won't deliver. And I've seen that time and time again in transformation projects and in software development as well. So that connection between the possible and the reality needs to be really, really strong. And then the final kind of key challenge I see is integration. Manufacturing is one industry that doesn't suffer from a lack of data. You think about the historians, the PLCs, the SCADAs you've got across the business. The amount of data you have is phenomenal. But those legacy systems that you have that has that data you can do something with tend to be very, very siloed and often difficult to get that data out of. So really that prevents harnessing the information and the knowledge that you have within those systems to really create a large level of digital adoption. And I think this stuff isn't going away, though. The need for these challenges need to be addressed because, a recent report last year by Rockwell Automation, and apologies for potentially using competitor names here, but Rockwell Automation did this. They produce a report every year, and 95% of the manufacturers that were part of that report are saying they are evaluating technologies around smart manufacturing. But many of those are struggling with the implementation for the reasons I talked already. So it is a priority, but there is still a gap between what we can actually deliver.
And I guess that leads on to the next question. I know you covered quite a lot there, but the fact you mentioned the struggle of implementation at the end there just got me thinking because, and there's a difference between implementing obviously smaller proof of value, proof of concept, and then implementing something at scale, which I guess is the goal for vendors, for manufacturers, because they want to see the benefits at scale. I mean, that's what we're all looking for. But what's actually preventing the scale part of that?
Well, in the last podcast, which obviously everybody had listened to, we talked about what scaling really means, because scaling means different things to different people. Is it an operator scaling within their factory, or is it a plant manager or an operations director scaling across their network of factories? So both concepts of scale are correct. But Pilot Purgatory it's a phrase that gets used a lot, is still very, very prevalent. And it's really interesting, actually, that in January, the World Economic Forum released their latest Global Lighthouse Network report. And one of the things that these global lighthouses, these are basically, a global lighthouse is an example of how a factory can run using digital technologies, and are really showing financial and operational benefits in doing so. So these are kind of lighthouses to hold up and say, look, this is a great example of how you can do things. 82% of those lighthouses started their transformation with a very clear plan on how to scale. That avoids that Pilot Purgatory challenge. So 82% have a plan to scale rather than a plan to demonstrate a use case's value. Having that plan is really important. And tools like the Smart Industry Readiness Index, or and if you've got an Apple device, I apologize right now, but SIRI, those methodologies really are great, having a very pragmatic approach to say, these are my business objectives, particularly focused on manufacturing. Yeah, these are the outcomes, the timescales I want to achieve those outcomes are. This is my maturity today, and what are the things, and a competitive benchmark, and then saying, well, what are the things that will have the greatest influence of improving my competitive position, and in what sequence do I need to do them in? So having that very clear and structured roadmap from tools like SIRI, I think, is really very valuable. Another reason why projects, let's be honest, don't scale and get stuck in pilots is cultural resistance. Yeah, there's a lot of hesitation. There's always been a hesitation of adopting new technology. I talked about it a second ago, but without a clear view of the why, it's very difficult to sell that to leadership. It's even harder to sell it to the operations, the frontline workers. They're actually doing this. So, having a clear view of the why, and then starting to break down that barrier of cultural resistance, because people can see how it affects, how it makes their day job better. So I think that those two areas are, probably the two biggest areas for scalability from pilots I see is you don't have a plan to scale. You don't know the sequence by which you need to scale, and then people generally resist the adoption of those new technologies.
And I guess there's a really interesting, I was reading the report, or some slides you presented previously, and you mentioned this sort of SIRI, the framework. It's it's really, really interesting. about, because we have our own sort of readiness, Senseye Predictive Maintenance product has its own sort of readiness index. So that's what sort of caught my attention. But is that really the best way for organisations to sort of analyse and see where they are in terms of that maturity?
So I think there's a couple of things, and please shoot me as I go along on this. Number one is it's independent. It's not linked to any software or vendor, so it has a high degree of objectivity. And secondly, it is more holistic. It looks at the processes that you have. It looks at the technologies, and it looks at the organizational structure. And that latter piece often I see missing in readiness assessments. It's also independently benchmarking. So it will look at you and say, look, where is your rating today in the area of, let's say, automation, or the way you're using intelligence or connectivity within your shop floor, And it'll say, in your industry, you are here, and your competitors' average is here, or you're like the top 20% here and the bottom 20% here. So you can see, are you performing on average better or worse than the industry you're in, or in generally for manufacturing? So it gives you a view there, but also it gives you the priorities. So often I see that one of the things that SIRI does is it does look at many different areas, from your governance, but your skills and the talent you have as well, which is the point we made a minute ago. And a barrier may be just including what's the, it's a horrible phrase, by the way, you use this leadership competence, but what's the readiness, the knowledge levels of the leadership in your business to actually take digital transformation forward? Are they reliant on third parties to give them, how to breathe in this context? Or can they breathe themselves? Or can they teach others to breathe? And that level of knowledge within your leadership is also a massive thing to unlock the opportunity. So to me, SIRI has been done, executed well over 5,000 times now across 60 different countries in the world. To me, it's pretty much the definitive position. It's got no bias to it. It's run by a not-for-profit business. So ultimately, if you want an objective view, I'm not saying that the Senseye readiness isn't objective, but it is totally independent. And 5,000 assessments to benchmark against, you're going to get a pretty good view on where you are.
And I guess first of all, we should clarify SIRI. What does SIRI stand for?
The Smart Industry Readiness Index.
Yeah, no, fantastic, and you're completely right as well. Independent, but what I also thought was quite impressive is it's broad. Our readiness. Checker. We've got an ROI calculator on our website where you can check your readiness for predictive maintenance. But this is much broader than that, and doesn't just cover technology, but by what you're saying, Nick. So I think that's where, and it's independent. So I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, the pragmatism as well. I've seen kind of the Big Four, because all the Big Four, all the major consultancies also have a version or something of their own assessments. But they are very, very expensive and quite often rely on their own benchmark data and take many weeks on a lot of investment on your side as a manufacturer to absorb. Whereas something like SIRI, or the Smart Industry Readiness Index, that can actually be delivered in a matter of weeks and probably only takes about 2 days on site to conduct the interviews. So it's done at the right level of pragmatism and respects actually that manufacturing continues to operate whilst you need to do these assessments. You can't shut down the factory to have a chat. So it's very, very pragmatic and gives, though, a really well certified outcome. Now, I want to make the call here that SIRI was actually founded a few years ago. I mean, you can imagine 5,000 assessments. It's not been created last week. But organizations like McKinsey, Siemens, the Singaporean Economic Development Board, and the World Economic Forum were all behind that framework. So and Siemens are there as part of the original founding. So actually, it's got a lot of credibility, and given it was actually primarily sponsored out of the Singaporean Economic Development Board, it's got a lot of rigor to it and the methodology as well.
Yeah, and I guess how can people get involved? If they want to have their own assessment undertaken, how easy is it for them to get involved?
Well, first of all, one of the things you could do is go to my website. This is not a sales plug, by the way, but I am one of the few global SIRI and co-SIRI, which is the sustainability equivalent assessors around. But the other way of doing it is going on to the InSight, which is the International Center of Industrial Transformation. Yeah, I'm sorry, I had to remember that. And Raymond Klein's going to kill me, but he's the CEO of that. But InSight are the actual owning body, and that's a great place to start to have a look at that website. But if you want to do just search Nick Leeder and Smart Industry Readiness Index or SIRI, you're undoubtedly going to find a bit more about it there.
No, and that's okay, because I set you up for that by complete accident, I should also say too. So I just think people would be genuinely interested about, that sounds great. How do I get started?
I'll just clarify the sales plug piece. I say I've been the management consultant. I've owned these transformations in the industry, and I'm a supporter of SIRI more than an executor of it. Yeah, it's not my core business model. But I really do support what they're trying to do. Because actually, I've just seen so much money wasted on useless benchmark and so much time wasted. And this one approach has really struck a chord for me in terms of the balance of pragmatism and actually the ability to do something that's executionable for a manufacturing business off the back end of it. So to me, whilst it may sound like a sales pitch, but to me, having been on the other side of the fence and having commissioned these sort of reports previously, this one stands out quite differently for me.
Oh, fantastic. And I guess just to tackle it, because we've covered a lot so far already. So in terms of data and implementation and the ability to scale the challenges around that. And you mentioned agentic AI, which is another buzzword coming into everyone's feeds and emails and everything else at the moment. But if we talk about sort of generative AI as a broader sense, how does that fit to some of the topics we've talked about today in terms of implementation and adoption, and maybe even readiness for technology? And maybe what are some of the use cases sort of driving that forward at the moment?
Yeah, look, AI, we can't escape it. It's happening everywhere. But if we really are taking a step back and looking at manufacturing and manufacturing businesses, before we get carried away with the opportunity of AI, we need to make sure, actually, and I mentioned this earlier, that you have the right data. Because a lot of this analysis, there's different points of view, but I still believe that great contextualized data in the context of your specific operations is really, really valuable and will give you a lot more benefit from then taking forward an AI. I was speaking to a CTO of a business not too long ago, maybe a couple of weeks ago, actually, and he was saying that at the board level, they're talking about how do they use AI as a business. And he's saying that's the wrong conversation. It's what are our priorities as a business? And then within those priorities, how could AI be utilized? So it is literally 180 degrees on that question. And I think that's where a lot of the mistakes get made right now on AI is, well, where do we use AI? No. What are the priorities? Where can, therefore, AI be used to support those priorities? Let's get back to my point of being clear on your why. And that could be from improving customer service because you've got issues around having effective response times on customer issues, or it could be things like improving or reducing the downtime, unplanned downtime in the factory. So, some of the things I see AI being used a lot today are really optimization routines. So where data is already well structured and well thought through, and using that to better predict what outcomes could be, and then still using humans still to interpret the final decisions from the information that AI gives them. So supply chain optimizations, looking at logistical challenges, the resistance in your supply chain network, They're really good use cases. Just basic planning on the shop floor, material availability, using some AI tools there to make sure that you have correct stocks based on the order entries and improving your forecasting processes. And I would be incredibly remiss if I didn't talk about predictive maintenance as well. AI does and can really help unplanned maintenance and unplanned downtime, and also, let's be honest, too much maintenance because you're maintaining things too often because you're just running on a planned maintenance schedule. And AI, I've heard lots of stories. It can range from 30 to 50% benefits and reducing downtime by that amount. But I also want to call out, you need to be making sure that you're monitoring the correct equipment. Yeah, that those assets are the critical assets. You are monitoring the right points. And there is often a steep curve of false positive alerts, particularly as you're learning around it, because you will get, oh, this machine is going to fail. Is it? And just use your human intuition as maintenance teams to actually start validating, okay, that's correct. And then the engines learn as you go along with these things. But I see a lot of companies, and this is another reason, by the way, often we get stuck in pilots, is give up too fast. Yeah, companies give up too fast because of the false positives. They don't keep on that training routine, and they get frustrated around it. So predictive maintenance is definitely on the up on AI. I see a lot of new entrants in here that don't actually have the pedigree of predictive maintenance, but have the knowledge of AI and oversimplify the challenge. Because let's be honest, if one day you're producing this product and next day you're producing this product, the vibrations you will get from the production processes will be and the machines on it will be different. And that has to be part of the learning. And so I think this space could be oversimplified. And I think there are, and I'm going to say absolutely neutral, there's loads of predictive or condition-based monitoring heritage businesses that understand condition-based monitoring that are really now progressing very, very strongly in the use of predictive maintenance and AI. And ultimately, that will become prescriptive. And things like then agentic AI kicks in, where actually you're starting to get the interaction between the AI model and the actual machines themselves. And that's where the human starts coming out the loop. I think we're a little software capability is undoubtedly there, but do we have the data, and do we have enough skills and experience to make that confident leap yet? I still think we're a little bit away from that.
Yeah, no, and I completely agree with that. I think that's definitely where the roadmap, let's say, is going. On the point you mentioned about learning along the way, and there being maybe false positives or things like that, it's interesting. It reminds me of a story someone was telling me the other day about a customer who was actually reluctant to feedback that the app, they felt bad for saying, oh, the app missed something, or didn't do something as expected. The customer, this is saying this to us, but we were like, no, that's actually good. We need to know that stuff, because then we can otherwise, like you said, you keep it to yourself and maybe grumble about it a little bit, and then it's bad for everyone because the project doesn't progress, and then and that's it, and there's no success when it could have been something very simple to fix, and then carry on, fix it, and then see success later on. That kind of thing.
And it does. Success, for all of us, I'm sure we can all lay testament to, success doesn't ever happens overnight. It takes time, and it takes some work. So that's no different to deploying an AI strategy in manufacturing.
I mean, I guess we've talked a lot about the challenges, but maybe it'd be good to sort of, as we're sort of coming towards the end, talk about the successes of this digital transformation. I mean, is there sort of key examples you get? I know you might not be able to mention names, but even just some of the lessons that some of these companies have learned along the way, Nick, from your own experience.
Yeah. So when I see successful transformations, normally they're not a transformation of everything. They start small and they scale fast. Yeah. But they have that plan. I talked about that roadmap, that plan to go from an example here. Let's do predictive maintenance on these these set of machines, and then let's grow it as part of an overall strategy within the plant. And, let's measure, importantly, let's measure the benefits and the improvements we get along the way. So, the things I would always see on successful transformations, and I problem here is I've got too many to think about in terms of where do I start. So let me just summarize a couple of key points given the time we've got. Number one, be absolutely clear on your why. So you know that you're transforming for a reason and not chasing technology trends. And that can be often the cause of pilot purgatory or failed investments. You've got to start with something small and something quick. If it takes 12 months to do and then a further 12 months to benefit, that stuff's never going to get off the ground. So start with small, demonstrable and measurable wins that can help build improvement that also helps resistance to change and adoption of these technologies. And that linking to that point, invest in the workforce. Manufacturing is still a people game, from top floor to running the operations all the way down to the shop floor. Yeah. So train the employees on why this stuff is important, train them how to use it. But also, if you're a leader in a business, invest in yourself. Make sure that you're investing in your own knowledge so you are equipped to see the opportunities and not get sucked in by buzzwords. The final piece is that strategy, that roadmap has to be underpinned by both a data strategy so that that data is visible, that is connected, that can drive those insights that you need to make decisions, to drive those improvements, that can be utilized for things like AI, but also have a strategy around security as well, because you can't just open up everything to get the data out. There are many industries we operate in where there's many questions around data security. The phrase cyber security you hear a lot, but have a plan around those things as well, around it. So one thing we have seen, and I'll go back to the latest Lighthouse report by the Global Lighthouse Network report by WEF, yeah? Those companies that follow that sort of very straightforward and quite logical steps, and have a transformational plan and model, see 2 to 3 times the ROI over 3 years. So it is significantly beneficial. There are plenty of case studies from operators using augmented reality to learn new skills or to operate machines, connected machines and predictive maintenance and next generation of condition-based monitoring to help, all the way through to having a full-on AI strategy to optimize your supply chain and resilience. These things are real, but it needs to be relevant to you.
Yeah, and that's a really good sort of note to finish on as well. I guess that the underlying thing as well is that it needs to be considered, but it's also so important, all of this, to stay competitive. But you need to be doing the right things and focusing in the right area, otherwise you're spread too thin as well. Which project do we focus on? Then you don't put time into any of them, and then they're all not going anywhere, right?
Yeah. And I think that competitive is an interesting piece. I've recently put an article out that's got a lot of attention, actually, called The 7 Deadly Sins of Digital Transformation in Manufacturing. And one of those is, I'm trying to remember if it's envy or lust. Yeah, one of the 2 sins. But following your competitor's strategy is not a strategy. Yeah. Mm-hmm. In fact, if I would say that's a route to failure. So what you need to do is understand where the opportunities are for you, what impact it will have to your business, and therefore have the ability to actually improve your competitive position against your competitors. Because you may already find that you are ahead in some of the areas of your competitors, and further investment in that will not yield further competitive advantage. So you need to identify where those weaknesses are and make it very specific, your strategy to you. And maybe just going full circle a little bit on my side, that's real strength of something like the Smart Industry Readiness Index.
Absolutely. And I think, even I can talk from a marketing perspective. Don't copy competitors. You can admire, you can look, and you can learn, but you don't copy, because your business is unique, right? And you need to, and that's the whole point. You want to focus whatever initiatives on your business out.
It must be envy, mustn't it? It must be the envy thing. Yeah.
Maybe. But no, absolutely. So I think that sort of brings us to a close today. So I think the things we need to share, just listing this in my own mind, I guess, but we've got the SIRI framework, more information about that, and maybe a link to where to download the report as well would be useful.
Yeah,
so I'm listing this in my, maybe not interesting to list them, I'm just listing this in my head. So we'll provide those resources in the links below, so you can explore a bit more. And of course, but no, I think aside from that, thank you, Nick, for your time today. We're going to have future sessions as well. So if you don't know Nick now, then you can learn more about him in our future sessions as well. But for today, thank you, Nick, and thank you everyone out there for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks, everybody.
Please like and subscribe on all major podcast channels, and find out more about Senseye Predictive Maintenance at Siemens.com.